Okay, so today's we are going to discuss the first machine learning algorithm of the unsupervised learning. In previous lecture, we discussed introduction to machine learning, what are the types of machine learning, what is supervised learning, what is unsupervised learning, how we actually train a model, how we evaluate model, what is data analysis, importance of data analysis, and many other things that were discussed in the previous lecture. If you have any questions related to that or you would like to discuss anything, you can. Otherwise, we are going to start the first unsupervised learning algorithm. Okay, so this is quite easy. Let's start. So first of all, we are going to start from the unsupervised learning, and the algorithm that we are going to see is one of the clustering algorithms. Unsupervised learning, just a quick recap, whenever our data set is unlabeled or our given data set is without labels, I mean the data set is not supervised or labeled by a human, by a machine, or any person. You can say the experiments of the previous history are not labeled. Then, of course, we cannot train a supervised learning model, so we will train an unsupervised learning model. So model must discover the patterns from the data itself because the data samples or the experiments are not labeled. So of course, model should discover the patterns itself. Relationship exists between the data. Of course, if dataset has some relationships, then this model will be able to learn, develop those relationships. It needs more complex processing and applications of K-mean clustering is in anomaly detection, in document categorization, relevant news, clustering or segmentations, grouping, and then the customer segmentation. Customers having similar interests, having similar kind of service requests can be segmented using the clustering techniques. Clustering is basically a grouping technique. So if I talk about the K-mean clustering algorithm, one of the famous unsupervised learning clustering algorithm, which is called the K-means clustering, it is actually the K-means is like a team of people you can consider those are trying to find the best spots to build the K fire stations in a city. Okay, in a city you need to build the K number of fire stations, and you have a team containing, let's say, two people, three people, those are actually trying to find the exact or the better or the optimal positions for the installation of fire stations. You don't want them all in the same neighborhood. Of course, we don't want different fire stations at the same place in a city. We want them at the best optimal place that they covered the complete city and they are at the best particular positions, and you want each station to be as close to as many houses as possible. Of course, we also want this. We don't want the K5 stations like outside the city or boundary of the city. We want the K5 stations where the population is actually living. That optimization of location is exactly what the algorithm is doing mathematically. So this is how actually the K-mean clustering algorithm works. You have a k number of people in the team, and in k-mean clustering you have k number of centroids, and those are actually trying to find the best possible location in your data set that actually covers the diversity of the data set better. We will see the example, then you will get the idea. This was just a bigger picture how k-mean clustering actually works. This is the visualization. For example, if we have this kind of sample, you can see we have different things mixed up with each other. But if we apply a k-mean clustering algorithm, so clustering algorithm on the basis of some similarities, maybe on the basis of the color similarity, maybe on the basis of size similarity, there could be other features as well. On the basis of those, the clustering algorithm actually groups similar items. You can see in this particular image, This is the input to the model, and there was not any label. Like we did not label that this sample is this sample is this, and this sample is this. There is no label of this thing. They are just mixed up with each other, and we just passed on this to the algorithm, and algorithm automatically identifies the similarities of the items and then group those items together. And you can see that the similar items are grouped together. This is what we are expecting the output of this clustering algorithm is. You can see it is a very good algorithm, and we are getting our output very clearly in the form of the clusters. Okay. So another example is, for example, if you have a lot of images in the database and you want to cluster, you have seen many of you have the uh, smart mobile phones, and if you just open your gallery, there are different options nowadays in your mobile phone galleries. You can see the automatically generated stories, and most of the images belong to same nature. Maybe you are on a trip, you capture different memories, and mobile phone automatically identifies, okay, these are the images of the similar area. Okay, looks like from a similar trip, and it generated its separate story, including or merging all the images of particular that trip. This is on the basis of grouping or the clustering of the similar items. The same way you can see these are the images, and as a output you can see the similar images or this similar group of images grouped together, and the other similar images are grouped together, and the third similar images are grouped together. So this is what the output of kind of clustering or the grouping algorithm. Okay. So how it actually works in the case of the documents clustering, we have different pre-processing steps before we group the documents on the basis of their text. For example, we have the tokenization step. We have to tokenize or break down the sentences into words into tokens, and the stop words removal. We need to remove the stop words, the question marks, full stops, and many other stop words. We need to do the stemming. We need to do the term weighting. Stemming, for example, we need to convert the words into actual words. There are many adverb in the word, for example, going, writing, and many other words. So this step is actually uh, converts the adverb words into plain words or the nouns kind of words. And then the term weighting on the basis of the repetition of the words. And then after the pre-processing, we will make the documents representation, and then we will apply the clustering algorithm. There are multiple clustering algorithms. And then after that, you can check the the validity of the clusters made of the documents. This is another illustration for the understanding. This is the example given as an input. You can clearly see that every point or every sample in this input uh, don't have any kind of label. We cannot actually differentiate that which sample belongs to which group if we want to group together. But once we applied the unsupervised learning k-mean clustering algorithm, we can get the similar groups like this. You can see these samples belong to a similar group, these samples belong to similar group, and these samples belong to the third similar group. You can see the output like this. One important point here I would like to mention is how many total number of groups could be in this data set is actually given to the k-mean clustering algorithm. For example, if I want to make three clusters, I will give the input k variable is equal to 3, and then it will create the three similar groups. So Generally, as a human being, you can see that after seeing a visualization, a human brain can see, okay, how many different groups could be in this particular data set. But yes, there are some complicated scenarios I will show you in upcoming examples, in which even a human cannot clearly see that how many different groups could be in this data set where this algorithm performs much better. And there are some other improvements, the other variants of k-mean clustering available. Uh, for the better clustering algorithm, we can see those later on. Okay, so why these number of samples belong to this one group? Because of the similarities that we at this point we don't know. We will see later on. But of course, on the basis of some similarities, these points are grouped together. And these points are grouped together on the basis of some similarities, and these points are grouped together on the basis of some similarities. Two things that are very important according to this algorithm I need to discuss in upcoming slides, but I'm just giving you an overview of that thing. The distances within a cluster, you can say the intra-cluster distance and the distance between one and other clusters. We can say the inter-cluster distance. These two distances are very important to evaluate the accuracy or the validity of the clusters that we have made. Just give me a minute. I need to pick a call. Okay, it has been disconnected. No problem. So these are different clustering approaches for the unsupervised learning datasets. Clustering, local outlier factor, expectation maximization, principal component analysis, independent component analysis, non-negative matrix factorization, singular value decomposition, and isolation forests. We will be focusing more and seeing the clustering techniques in the unsupervised learning. Within clustering, there are multiple algorithms like k-mean clustering I am discussing with you, hierarchical clustering, okay, and many other algorithms in the within the clustering technique. So we have to see one, two different clustering algorithms. The other, we are not going to discuss the other techniques of the unsupervised learning. Okay, so partition unlabeled examples into disjoint subsets using the clustering algorithms such that the samples within a cluster are very similar and the samples in different clusters are very different. So, of course, our end goal is the samples within each cluster should be very similar. That is why they are in the same group. And the samples, those are in another cluster, should be very different uh, from each other. So if this is the thing, then your clustering accuracy is good. That is why I was mentioning in easy words, you can say the intra-cluster distance, within cluster distance, it should be very less. The samples should be cluttered with each other, and the inter-cluster distance should be high so that we can easily differentiate, okay, this is one cluster, this is second cluster. So yes, so select a similarity or dissimilarity function, and on the basis of course, you can create the groups either on the basis of similarity or on the basis of dissimilarity. So group samples based on this function, similar ones be in one cluster and the different ones put to the other cluster. This is what I was talking about, the intra-cluster distance and the inter-cluster distance. If your inter-cluster distance is high, it means the clusters are good because they are very apart from each other. They are not mixing up with each other. And the intra-cluster distance should be minimized because we want that whatever the samples, those are inside a cluster, are actually the samples of that cluster. For example, if there is a point at this stage, so this point will impact the strength or you can say the accuracy of this cluster, because we can say that this point is far from the all other points, and the distance of this point from the other clusters, of course, from this one it is very high, but from this blue cluster, the distance is, it seems greater, but of course, it is confusing actually the red and the blue cluster. Okay, if it is exactly at center, then of course it is confusing. But even if it is far away from blue or red, it is a kind of outlier sample which is affecting the accuracy of either red cluster or the blue cluster. We will see these kind of samples. So there are many types of clustering algorithms. Many algorithms use similarity or dissimilarity criteria. The way they find the grouping is different. Some popular clustering algorithms are the k-mean clustering. There is actually a variation of k-mean clustering which is called k-means plus plus, k-mean plus plus clustering. And then we have the agglomerative clustering, hierarchical clustering, main shaped, spectral clustering, and mixture of Gaussians. These are the different clustering techniques that we use for the unsupervised learning. We will be seeing the k-means clustering first and then following on agglomerative and hierarchical clustering. K-mean clustering is a very famous, simple, and powerful unsupervised machine learning algorithm. It has been applied to many complex unsupervised machine learning problems. I'll show you some of the use cases of k-means later on at the end of the lecture. A k-mean clustering algorithm tries to group the similar items in the form of the clusters. The number of groups is represented by k. K is the number of groups. It should be given beforehand. Yes. We need to tell actually how many groups we want from this data set. This is, you can say, some kind of limitation of k-mean clustering. And K should be the predetermined. Each cluster is associated with the centroid point, the center point of the cluster. You can say the gravity point of the cluster. Each point is assigned to the cluster with the closest centroid. A number of clusters K must be specified. The objective is to minimize the sum of distances of the points to their respective centroid. You can say the objective is to minimize the intra-cluster distance and maximize the inter-cluster distance. This is one example illustration for you, and you can see if you just for a moment, if you just consider that there is no red, yellow, and blue dot, it is a simple data set of the black dots. You can see. First, we decided that we need to apply the unsupervised learning because all of these dots were not having any kind of labels. So we decided, okay, we will apply the unsupervised learning, and then we decided which algorithm of unsupervised learning. So we decided we will apply the k-means clustering. And then for k-means clustering, one predetermined thing is k. You know about this, that we need to tell the k-mean clustering what are the number of groups we are expecting. So what will be the k value? So we decided the k value will be 3. And then the second step is, okay, k value 3 means there will be 3 different groups that we want to make in this cluster, in this data set. And once we said that, okay, we will have to make the 3 clusters, then the point is, what are the starting points of these 3 clusters? Okay, this starting point is called the centroid, the gravity point of each cluster, which attracts the other points towards that group. So the one approach is the random centroid creation. So let's say we randomly selected this black point and colored it as a red. We randomly selected this is our centroid one, means the the gravity or the center point of one cluster, and this is the gravity or the center point of the second cluster. This is the gravity or the center point of the third cluster. So once we decided that there we will create the 3 groups, and then we selected the 3 different centroids randomly in the dataset. Now in the step 3, we will actually calculate the distance of each point from every centroid. For example, now we need to check that this point will be the part of group 1, I mean C1, or this will be the point of group 2, I mean C2, or this will be the point of group 3. So for this, we need to calculate the distance of this point from each cluster. Okay, so we will calculate the distance from this one. It is very simple. We can use different distance formulas. Euclidean distance, Manhattan distance, L2 norm, and many other. You can use the distance for the distance calculation of one point to from all the centroid points at the gravity points of each cluster, and this distance and this distance. Once we calculated this distance of this point from each cluster, we will assign this point to the cluster having minimum distance. Okay, what does this mean? This actually means this point has more similarity with this point. Okay, the gravity or the force of gravity or the attraction uh, of this point is much greater towards this, okay, as compared to the other particular 2 points, two centroid points or the gravity points. So this point will pull this point towards itself, and it will be assigned the red color to this point. In the same way, we will calculate the distance of each other point from every cluster, and then on the basis of the minimum distance, we will assign it to the uh, minimum distance cluster point. And eventually, we will get this kind of output. All these points has been assigned to this centroid, this group, and all these points has been assigned to this one. All these points has been assigned to this one. The story is not ended here. There is another important step. So, we selected these three centroid points randomly in the first iteration. So, of course, on the basis of this randomness, we cannot say that our grouping is good and we cannot stop at this stage. So we need to change the centroids with respect to time. And for this, there are some, of course, functions and many other things that we will be using. But let's see, first of all, let's complete the one iteration of the algorithm till the end. So, for example, this was the problem. We have given set of x with the n number of points in a d-dimensional space and an integer k. Group the points into k number of clusters, C1, C2, and C3, such that the cost of this function is minimized. Okay, the cost of this function is minimized. What does this mean? The cost of this function is minimized. Remember what we discussed previously, that we want the intra-cluster distance to be minimum and the inter-cluster distance to be maximum for the better output. So once our first iteration is complete, we randomly selected the centroids, we calculated the distance of every point from every centroid, and then assigned the point to the nearest centroid value. After this grouping, this kind of grouping generation, now we need to evaluate our groups. How much our groups are better or good, and what is their intra-cluster distances and what is their inter-cluster distances. And then we also need to update the centroid points. I will show you in next couple of minutes. Okay. So initial centroids are often chosen randomly. Clusters produced very far from one and each other. The original points, these were the original points. For example, this is the data set. As a human, just consider that this was the data set of the similar colors. We don't have done any grouping yet. So we need to apply the clustering and we need to do the grouping on the data set. So after optimal clustering on this data set, you got this kind of groups. This is one group, okay, this is second group, and this is the third group. This is after the clustering algorithm. If we see that uh, which kind of clustering output is better, for example, these are also three clusters. You can see very clearly. Okay. So what we did here, we gave this data set as an input. We applied k-mean clustering algorithm. The k value was 3. We make the three groups and it gives us the two outputs. Of course, these are the three number of clusters and these are the three number of clusters. Why you can say that this is the suboptimal and this is the optimal? Anyone, please. What do you think of? Why we are calling this suboptimal clustering?
सर क्योंकि जो
Yes.
रेड वाले हैं ग्रुप फुली नहीं है, मतलब एक क्लस्टर में नहीं है, वो
Yeah,
सेपरेटेड है।
good point. Good point. We can, in other words, we can say the intra-cluster distance of this group is very high. And we are saying that the inter-cluster distance should be low, minimized, and the inter-cluster distance should be high. And you can say the inter-cluster distance in this grouping is very low. It is actually inverse of that. And the intra-cluster distance is very high. Good. Okay, so these are the algorithm steps of this particular algorithm. We initialize k number of clusters. We randomly initialize the centroids of those groups. Then we calculate the compute the distances from each point, and then we assign the minimum distance on the basis of minimum distance, uh, the points to the relevant clusters. And then we actually update our centroids. This is what the last point that we need to see, and then we will move towards an example how and why we update these centroids. So actually we do the multiple runs and select the clustering with the smallest error. Okay, the smallest error means again the same thing, the minimum intra-cluster distance and the maximum inter-cluster distance we actually expecting. If there will be the intra-cluster distance high, it is a kind of error for us. Select the original set of the points by methods other than the random. Yes, this is a good line. Just think of if you have any other idea how we can do other than the random, how we can initialize the initially centroids points that we are initializing randomly at this moment. What could be the other methods? Pick the most distance from each of the points to the cluster centers. This is the variation of k-means plus plus. Yes, so k-means plus plus. The difference between k-mean and k-mean plus plus is actually the initialization of first initialization of the centroid points. In simple k-means, we initialize the centroid points initially randomly. And in k-mean plus plus, we initialize the initial number of the centroids on the basis of some calculation that we will see later on the basis of actually the distribution of the points. We our our attempt is to initialize the clusters, the centroid points. Those are very far from each other for better convergence, or you can say for faster convergence. Because randomly you can pick the centroid points, those are very close to each other. So it will actually take a lot of computation and time to come to uh, that optimal convergence point. Okay, so let me before moving towards these mathematical formulas for the calculation and the evaluations and many other things, let me first tell you the reason behind the updation of the points. Okay, we can consider, let's say, this particular example, and yeah, this one. Okay, so what we can do is we can remove everything, and I'm going to create the I'm going to create the clusters on the basis of my guess. Okay, just for our understanding. Okay, so as if we guess is it's if we guess it correctly, this will be a one red cluster group. And let me change actually the color if I can get it lucky. This should be the second cluster at the end of the algorithm's output I am talking about. Okay, and this should be the third yellow cluster. It means that this point will be part of the yellow cluster, this point will be the part of yellow cluster, this will be the part of yellow cluster, and this will be the part of the yellow cluster. And this is how actually the output will look like. I'm just going to mark it a little bit. Okay. And finally, you can use the red one. This is what the output of the algorithm will look like after iterations, a lot of iterations. Okay, only one step that is remaining is actually the updation of centroids. So 2 points are very important to understand why we update the centroids and what's the benefit of updating the centroids. All right. So let's consider that we were actually, yeah, initially we randomly initialized this point as a centroid point of this cluster and this point as a centroid of this cluster and this point as a centroid of this cluster. So you can clearly see that this if you see the boundary of this cluster and the boundary of this cluster, maybe this one, this initialized random centroid is on the boundary of this cluster. Okay, you can see this. This is actually on the boundary of this cluster. So of course, the distance from this centroid of this point will be high. So one thing that we want our centroid to be in the center of the cluster. Okay, as you can state from the name, we are calling it centroid. So actually, it should be in the center of the cluster. So how we can make sure that our randomly initialized centroids are actually in the center of the cluster. So for this, actually, we do the multiple iterations. Okay. If we initialize this randomly, there could be this point of the red initialized randomly. There could be this point of blue initialized randomly because randomness could be anything and might be this as well. For example, if we say that randomly this point was initialized from this cluster, randomly this point was initialized from this cluster, and this point was initialized from this cluster. Okay, now you can see what I'm trying to say. The random initialization of centroid is not a good thing, but if there is a no option and we have to use this approach, then we need to update our centroids after each distance calculation or one iteration of every point. And how we can update the location of our centroid, it is very simple. Once we done this in our one step, once we done this in our one step, this cluster has been made, this cluster has been made, and this cluster has been made. Okay. Now you need to update your centroid. What you can do, it is very easy. Just take this point and you can say the mean calculation actually. So all of the points of this clusters mean value and then move these centroid points towards the result of those values. Of course, every point has x and y value. When you will calculate the mean values, there will be some mean x and y value. That will be your new centroid point for this cluster. In the same way, for this centroid, calculate the mean value and you will get a new mean centroid for the second cluster. And in this third group, you will calculate the mean value and you will get the new centroid for this group. In step 2, once our centroid is updated, we will again calculate the distance from each point. Okay, we will again do all the computations to check that on the basis of new centroids, our grouping is accurate or not. Okay, you will do again calculations and again update. And after this iteration, once you got this, you will again update the centroid. And then you will calculate the distance from every point on the basis of new centroid again. So now the question is how many times we will do this? Can anyone of you tell me the answer? It is very simple actually. How many times we will actually update or we will continue the updation of these androids and calculating the distances of the every point. Yes, yes, no input. Okay, it is not that difficult. We will keep updating the centroids until there is no updating values of the centroid. It's not that difficult. What we are doing here, we are actually trying to calculate the mean distance, okay, for the centroid calculation. And once the the grouping is accurate and the centroids are at the accurate position, so there will be no changes in the centroid values, even if you do the calculation again and again. So you can say that once we calculate the centroid values and after 2, 3 steps, the value is consistent, so we can stop because the grouping is uh, done at this stage. There could not be the further values update of the centroid, and of course, if there is no update in the centroid value, there will be no update in the cluster points. Okay, now moving towards this one. This is the again distance formulas I discussed with you. You can use a distance formula of simple distance, Euclidean distance, Manhattan distance. Okay, and you can use Minkowski distance. We can use cosine similarity distance. This is mostly for the text data. Cosine similarity, this is the function of the cosine similarity. This is for the Minkowski distance calculation. If you use p-value 1, it will work like simple the Manhattan distance. If you use the p-value 2, it will act like simple Euclidean distance. And this is simple 1 point distance minus centroid value. It's you can say the sum of square distances. Okay, and this is the value to calculate the new centroid. Okay, so you can calculate the new centroid. This is the mean of all the values of that particular points divided by the total number of points in that cluster. So you will actually get the mean value that's centroid. If we talk about the complexity, it is n into k into I into d, where n is the total number of points in that data set, k is the number of the clusters in that data set, and I is equal to the number of iterations in that data set, and D is the dimensionality of the data set. Okay, now for the evaluation, we have different evaluation metrics. The distance matrices was for the grouping, and of course now we have the evaluation matrix, the Davis-Baldwin index, the clusters, intra-cluster and the inter-cluster distances. All these are used for the evaluation or the validation of the clusters that the K-mean clustering has generated. It is again very simple, not that difficult. You are actually calculating the differences of the distances, and then you are taking the average and the sum of square root. Once you get this value, now you will actually sum on the basis of number of clusters. If there are two cluster, three cluster, four cluster, you will sum all of these clusters and divided by the distance between. It is actually one of this is the intra-cluster distance. This second one is the inter-cluster distance. If we divide this, we will get the one dispersion score, and this dispersion expectation or the score we will use to evaluate that our clusters are good enough or not. So let me tell you this thing. Here you can see the SK is actually telling us that how spread out is the cluster. This SK is telling you how actually the cluster is spread. You can say, in other words, the intra-cluster distance of that cluster. And this separation is how far the centroids or how far the clusters are. In easy words, you can say what is the inter-cluster distance of the clusters with each other. And then for the calculation, you can just sum up the spread of CK and CI, what we were doing here, and then we can divide on the basis of the distance between those particular centroids values. If your SKL is small, it means the clusters are tight and far apart. This is a good clustering output. But if your SKL value is large, the clusters are likely overlapping. Maybe the intra-cluster distance is high, or maybe the inter-cluster distance is very low. So this is how you can actually evaluate and check that what is the quality of the clusters that has been generated. Then, of course, there are some disadvantages of the K-mean clustering algorithm. The one very big disadvantage is you actually have to input how many number of groups you are going to generate in this data set. Sometimes we don't know. We cannot estimate accurately that how many groups will be in this data set. But if you know, then K-mean will perform good way. And if your densities mean the distribution of the data set is complicated, then K-mean clustering will suffer. We will see such examples in the next slide. So in kind of this type of data sets, you can see these are the original points and these are the K-mean clustering clusters. In this kind of data set, you can see the output of the K-mean clustering. So K-mean clustering actually generated the three clusters, but we are not happy with this. You can see clearly the problems in this clustering. The inter-cluster distance is very, very low, and the intra-cluster distance is very, very high. Okay, this is much better. At least the intra-cluster distance is very low, and also the inter-cluster distance is high. So if dataset distribution or the dataset shapes are complicated, K-mean clustering will suffer. And this is again, this were the original groups, and these are the groups generated by the K-mean clustering, which are not accurate. Oh, this is very complicated shape. Of course, no way that K-mean will give you the correct output. For this kind of clustering, there are some other clustering algorithms like DBSCAN, density-based clustering algorithms. Those can actually capture the similarities if the shape is very complicated or the different because they do clustering on the basis of the density, not on only on the basis of the distance of one point to other. The example of image segmentation, uh, if some of you use the video editing or the image editing tools, you have seen that you can actually segment one similar kind of things in each image very accurately. This is on the basis of the grouping of the pixels and the similarity of the pixels. So you can actually separate out the sky, the cloud, the water, and the lush green fields and many other things. So on the basis of the pixel similarities, you can group the similar things. We can use k-mean clustering for the customer segmentation, for the image compression, for the document clustering, for the anomaly detection. The similar type of anomaly or the attacks will be grouped together. And in document clustering, the similar topics or the and similar words, documents will be grouped together. In image compression, you have seen this. And in customer segmentation, the customer having similar interest, similar age groups, similar metadata will be grouped together. This is one of the example, and there is another example on this link. Uh, I will suggest go ahead and do this example by hand for the better understanding of the clustering algorithm. You should do all these steps, initialize the k number of uh, clusters, then random centroids, then update the centroids, then do the grouping, then do the evaluation, the calculation of the uh, evaluation of your clusters. That's it from my side. If there is any question, you can ask me, and then we can solve any one of these examples.